Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Bill Witherspoon, who's here to share with us his Nautilus Grand Prize award-winning book, Enter Space: Stories from the High Desert. So how does a lifetime in the high desert shape the meaning of art, purpose, and presence? In Enter Space, Bill Witherspoon invites us into a world few dare to enter, a raw, reverent landscape where art, nature, and spirit converge. Bill Witherspoon is a visual artist, author, and serial entrepreneur whose work spans 6 decades and includes 40 solo exhibitions of paintings, prints, and sculptures, as well as expansive public art projects in the high, steep desert of southeastern Oregon. He's the founder of Sky Factory, a family-run studio that blends fine art and digital technology to create biophilic illusions of nature for restorative healthcare environments. As a fellow at the Center of Conscious Design and contributor to the NeuroArts Blueprint, Bill explores the role of beauty and perception in human health and experience. His deep love of the sky and reverence for solitude have informed a life of creative devotion, from watercolor painting to practicing ancient arts as spiritual discipline. His memoir, Enter Space: Stories from the High Desert, a 5-volume collection of essays and photography, was named grand winner at the 2025 Nautilus Book Awards and also earned a silver award in photography at the 2025 Forward Indies. His work has been featured in Fast Company, Inc. magazine, and the Wall Street Journal, and he was honored as Plane Tree Scholar of the Year in 2017 for his contribution to the patient experience. So welcome to the show, Bill Witherspoon.
Thank you.
Well, what a great honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I have one. I absolutely love it. Can you please share with us what even sparked the idea for Enter Space?
Well, that's an interesting question. I never intended to produce a book, but I started long ago writing short stories and the things that are in the book. And I wrote them totally for my own benefit because they were things that I didn't fully understand, or, whatever. And so I wrote them down because sometimes if you look deeply into things, you learn. And writing is a way of looking deeply, at least for me. So that's why I did it. And these things started to build up and accumulate. And at one point, maybe, 10, 15, 12 years ago, maybe or so, I shared some of them with a friend, David Navarrete. And he said, well, you should publish these. This should be a book. And that put the idea into my head. And I thought, okay, well, we'll see about that. But he kept after me. And finally, I said, well, if it can be useful, I'll do it. And I couldn't quite figure out what the use might be. I figured it would be like paintings, which I do a lot of, or prints or whatever. It would end up being a record of an experience, or a group of experience, or experience over time, because I think that's what paintings basically are. They're an artist's record of an experience of some sort. And would that contribute anything? Would that be useful? And the idea came up, and I was convinced, yeah, it could be useful because it could indicate something about how a person goes through their life, or a long section of their life, trying to figure things out. And even that would maybe be of interest and of value to people. So I said, okay, fine. Then we collected a few more people another artist and another graphic artist, and decided to put the thing together. And then the photographs came, and the photographs were done for the exact same reason. I never intended to show photographs or have an exhibition or put them in a book or anything. I did them for myself because I would see things that opened the possibility for seeing more deeply, which is really what I guess I've been about for decades as an artist, seeing more deeply in the hope of understanding, experiencing more deeply. So looking deeply, seeing deeply. So that's why I made the photographs. And then the fun of the book was getting four of us together, going through the stories and understanding them, reading them, and then figuring out which photographs would be appropriate to associate with those stories, because they're all from the same place, same periods of time, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how it happened. And the strange formatting, which is these accordion file, those came from a thought that occurred in an exhibition in San Francisco of the Ramayana, which is an ancient Indian text that was displayed there, and it was made by printing and text and images on palm leaves that were sequentially stitched. So it opened and closed. It was an accordion fold, and I loved it. I loved that way that it kind of forced time on you, in a sense of time. And you probably noticed, or maybe, that there are 5 books in there, 5 chapters or 5 booklets that correspond to different times or different stages, you might say, in this whatever journey or something like that. And that it just seemed to make sense to do it that way. So that's how it all came about.
Well, David is a really good friend. So to help you
He
get
is a
all that
good
together.
friend, and that's why I listened to him.
Well, I'd love to dive into the 5 volumes of this book. Can you share a little bit about each of them with us?
Once it was all put together in sequence, it turned out that, in fact, it was pretty much chronological. That's what made sense to all of us. And then we thought, well, we can't have one big, long, many, many pages of accordion. We've got to break it into smaller pieces. And I just had the thought, well, what are the stages in here? And how many are there? And within, a minute, those 5 names, those 5 categories, if you will, kind of showed up. And that's where we went with it. We never even changed them. It's just the way it happened.
Can you share with us the location where these photos are taken?
The photos, well, probably there's 108 photographs. And I would say that, well, all of them were taken within 40, 50 miles of each other as the crow flies. Probably 80% of them were taken within 10 or 15 feet of each other. So, and the reason for that is over time, I would go and stay at various places in this area in southeastern Oregon, high desert. And when I was there, my job was to look, to see. Yes, I'd walk around, but for some reason, most of the seeing that I recorded would be from just that spot where I was. And in the end, I spent several years in one spot, and everything I did was within, I don't know, 10 feet of everything else. Because then I was using a large camera and tripod and blah, da, 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 various things. So that's the way that worked out.
What's the draw to the Oregon high desert for you?
Ooh, that I hope will best be answered by one of the stories in there, which is called The High Desert, I think. And it's more almost an essay that I tried to get that down. But let me explain something about it. It is heaven for a minimalist, meaning there's not a lot going on, or it appears that there's not a lot going on. Number two, there is tremendous space, distance type of space in every direction. You look in every direction, and you're where I was located, especially toward the end, the last number of years or decades. I could see over 100 miles in most every direction, and in no direction would I see less than about 50 miles. So it was just a constant experience of space. And whenever you would walk or go outside, normally we look at our feet to make sure we're walking okay, fine. But the moment your attention would come up off the ground or off the sage, then boom, it would just go out. It would go out to an extreme distance. And that experience became, for me, a metaphor, I think. I think it was that kind of experience that at first attracted me to it when I first went to the desert, which was, I don't know, 60, 61, something like that. As a college student, I ended up out there and just fell in love with it, So something like that. But I really feel it had to do with the space. And the reason it had to do with the space is because for somebody who is oriented visually to seeing, seeing, when exposed to big space constantly, that becomes almost, well, I could say it becomes a metaphor. That's no problem. It becomes a metaphor for the unboundedness of the ineffable. But in truth, I think it becomes something more than a metaphor. It becomes an experience which supports or helps the nervous system to align itself with a legitimate experience of the ineffable, of the beyond, to use another word. And those experiences are the experiences that occur in one's inner life. So the desert is, and they're, for me, the priority experience. They're peak experiences. So in a sense, the desert is that high desert, which is not a hot, prickly, cactus-filled desert, by the way. That space, that environment, is a place where the outer sensory experience and the inner experience seem to support and reinforce each other.
Your book, I know it's been called on many levels, it's visual, intellectual, and spiritual. It engages us in that way. And I think that it also, your stories and the photographs are so lovely. They speak to these quiet moments for inner shift within ourselves.
Yeah.
What has been an inner shift that has really been profound in your life while being in the high desert?
It's a good question. And I guess I would have to say, as a very young man, I discovered that I had a need or a drive to see more deeply. And if I look back, even before I started to understand that or could articulate that, it was it was what was pushing me. So as a child, it was pushing me. And finally, after graduating from college, and then going and studying art in an art school and going to Europe and studying painting in Holland, in Amsterdam, I then began to realize that seeing was an important verb. I guess what happened in the desert is that need, desire to see deeply, to experience deeply, was supported to the point that you'll find in one of those stories that I really consider the desert as a teacher, as a mentor, as you know, as someone who was helping me to learn. And as time went on, and it became very clear that what seeing was about was not just material seeing, but really a tool or a way to move in the direction of self-realization, what is called self-realization or enlightenment. Now, did the desert help with that? Absolutely, yes. Did living in town and starting and running businesses and doing all the other things I did those things help with that? Yes. So it's not exclusive. At that point, I can't say exclusively, well, the desert, but the desert was a wonderful, wonderful teacher and led and or pushed or just supported that desire, that need for knowing, for real knowing, which is self-realization, in my opinion or experience. You know, if you want to get a job done, you want to get it done slowly, or do you want to get it done quickly or efficiently or effectively or correctly or what? There's all kinds of ways to get a job done. Working on that job in the desert was was ideal, highly productive, I would say, and looking back over my life anyway.
Sounds like a place that just feeds your soul in many ways.
Yes, that's a good expression, feeds, because because that gives something to the desert. When you say the desert feeds your soul, Bill, I agree. But I don't know that you're speaking poetically. I literally, I literally think that the desert does feed, that the environment can feed um, uh, us as individual creatures, organisms, because it can feed us um, in and nurture us in our um, innermost and most fundamental drive, is I think a fair word, to recognize who we are, which is nature. And what's the environment? Nature. What is the desert? It's just an expression of nature. It's different from the The Grand Tetons, totally different. It's different from deep forests, totally different. But it is nature. And it, for somebody like me, um, it it's the right aspect of nature to act as a teacher, as a mentor, as a guide, as a helper, as a friend.
As you've made over the course of your life this transition from artist, and maybe even a little bit of a spiritual seeker, ecologist, and desert surveyor, how has that shaped how you see the natural world and yourself?
The goal, in my experience, for a long time has been to make no distinction between me and nature, between self and nature. And in fact, I think that's the challenge. I think we are nature. I think nature is us. I think that basically there is a fundamental unity to life, and we can call that nature. If I look out the window into the trees, I see nature, and that's an expression of nature. If I look at, a street full of people moving, that also is an expression of nature. If I look inside myself, what I find is also that same fundamental, even unexpressed nature, source of nature. So we're all unified. We're all together. We're all bound. We're all brothers. We're all sisters. I don't care whether it's the trees or the snakes or the worms or the leeches or the ticks even, which I'm not fond of. We're all in the end one. And in the book, I think the last story is titled One, and I think it was very appropriate that it describes an experience which was not that different or unlike the experiences of the high desert, some of them, but it occurs in Walmart. And with my biases, Walmart was not my favorite place. I can't say that now, but at that time, it was not my favorite. Big box stores were not my favorite place to go or be. But one, nature, there too.
Well, you had my attention there. My goodness, I wasn't expecting that. So, your photography for Enter Space is just phenomenal. How did you pair this with the stories?
That was the most fun of the whole book, was pairing the stories and the photographs. For one thing, if you look at those photographs, this is not completely true, but it's very true of what I do now photographically. But these photographs go back a long time. The majority in the book are shot with a long lens, telephoto. And there's different cameras in there and so forth, but that in principle. Now, a long lens in the desert is an interesting tool. One would expect in the desert that you would have wide angle because there's so much space, and the desire to embrace that space, to get that space is pretty instinctive or natural. But it turned out that using a long lens would allow that deep space of the desert or distances of the desert to reveal events. Now, an event might be what's happening in a particular cloud with a particular light at the particular time of day and the particular wind currents. So that's what I'm meaning by an event. And there's events going on all the time, all around. But with a long lens, one can drill in, one can see deeply. And what one sees deeply in that case is an event. So I found myself just like I was doing in the stories, which when I would write something, it would be in order to see it more deeply, to get it more, understand it, experience it more deeply. Same thing was going on with the photographs. I didn't think of this at the time, but I realized I realized it not that long ago, after the book was published. So there's that commonality. And then I think that each of the stories creates a feeling, a question, exposes a certain area of life, and each photograph does that too. So the four of us would sit together, and we had, I don't know, 10,000, 15,000 photographs, and we just sped through them, and everybody knew the stories pretty well, and we would just say, oh, let's do that. And then we'd take a story, and then we'd look through and we'd collect, some number of photographs. And then we'd, yeah, maybe no, maybe. So it was a consensus thing, very much. And we would end up with 3 or 4 photographs that we felt aligned themselves appropriately with the story. They maybe ask the same question. There's some in there which are almost illustrative. There's some winter photographs that go with that story about the snow and being stuck and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of illustrative. But then there are some other photographs that seem to fit really well. I'm thinking some of the earth shadow photos. There's a lot of earth shadow photos where there's nothing substantial. It's just color. It's just color, natural color. And in something like the earth shadow, when you photograph that or see that, you are actually seeing light that's a few hundred miles away. You're looking through the atmosphere, through the Earth's atmosphere for hundreds of miles. So again, it's a kind of it's a kind of way of looking deeply, isn't it? And I know that there's several of those in that first story, Row Your Boat, which is really about a die and come back, near-death experience. And the essence of that was that field of consciousness which exists irrespective of life and death and bodies and all the rest of it. No surprise that those photographs ended up there and in a few other places where the subject was similar.
I really appreciate you taking the time to explain that. One of the things I'd love to ask you is for people who are looking for guidance on their own path of self discovery through solitude and nature, what would you share with them?
The first thing I would say is learn how to meditate and then do it regularly, because that is probably one of the most humanly effective tools we have for helping our awareness to open, to expand, and to experience more deeply. I mean, that was a big part of my experience in the desert. Even though I went to the desert before I learned to meditate, and when I was trying to learn to meditate, on my own, which wasn't very successful, and then, but I think that that's one of the best things one can do, because from there, everything unfolds, expanding one's awareness and the reality and the beauty, the deep beauty, unfolds, and it becomes accessible. And then nature shines, everything shines, people shine, the whole business shines.
Well, Bill, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your book, which is just phenomenal? I actually bought one as a gift and I'm keeping it myself, so I have to buy another book here soon. So where can
Yes.
people go to connect with you?
Well, the best way to do that is website, enterspacenow.com. And on there is all the information about the book. There's a bunch of photographs there. There's a media section, which has some other elements that people could find interesting, some videos, and a video of a project which was done in about 1990, which raised a little bit of a furor, but it was a very innocent part of that desert experience, and that was making a very large quarter mile Sri Yantra in the desert. A group of artists, son and some other, we gathered together and went and did that, made that, and and a lot of people have enjoyed that. It got a lot of craziness because people thought it was done by aliens, and in fact, it wasn't. So there's all kinds of there's enough information there. My other work is not really it's not online. My paintings and monoprints and sculptures and so forth, just have never gotten it online. Respond to emails if somebody has a question. How do I do this or what? This or that. I respond to emails. I'm happy to do that.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you for having me and for your kind words and very kind and penetrating questions.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your award-winning book, Enter Space: Stories from the High Desert. Make sure to visit Bill's website at enterspacenow.com to learn more about his work, be part of his community, and also purchase his book. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.